My name is Scott Christensen, and I am a faculty member in the College of Business at the University of Missouri. And I've also been helping out with something called the Alfred Friendly Press Partners. And Randy Smith, who's Randy Smith, who's just joining us, is the president of the Press Partners. And that organization has been around for over 40 years. That's helping journalists, mainly in emerging democracies, get the training that they need to be very effective journalists in their home countries. And that was the model for many years. This year, it's really focusing on, and the last year as well, on journalists in exile. So those that have been forced to leave their country because of their reporting and are now having to create new lives here. And so the organization has kind of pivoted and is, I guess, revitalizing itself around this new mission. And one of the things that we're very interested in is what are some of the basic tools that you can use as a journalist? Technical tools. There's lots of things out there like AI now, and other things that we can find on the internet. So we're trying to make sure that we're helping uh, not only journalists learn about these tools that they might not be aware of, but those people that are supportive of great journalism, like myself. I'm not a journalist by trade, but I'm very curious about how in the world do they figure this stuff out. And so I was very happy that James here, one of our students at the University of Missouri, agreed to put this series together. We'll have another one in April, and I'll send out some information about that, and that will be about data visualization, and then we'll be doing some other ones throughout this next year. All free to you, and once again, just a resource for those people that are in the field or supportive of the field of journalism. Randy, did you want to say anything else before we get started? Oh, you're muted, I'm afraid.
Other than welcome, it's great to have everyone here, and I'm looking forward to an educational evening. And I don't want to take up too much time, but this is just a representative of the many good things we have going at the foundation now. And I want to thank Scott and everyone else for all their hard work to put this together. Thank you so much, James, for
Yeah.
doing this.
And the Zoom has changed a little bit. I've noticed I now have two options. I have meeting and I have James's screen on my top there. I don't know if I selected that at some point or if this is some new Zoom feature. You may have something different if you're not seeing James's screen right now, but I'll turn it over to James.
Hi everyone, my name is James Bianco. I am a student at the University of Missouri. I'm actually in the College of Business. Like Scott said, I've been helping out with these open source intelligence workshops. But yeah, so just gonna get started here. Um, so different from the last session, kind of about what we're gonna be talking about today is more uh, journalistic stories and identifying people. And part of that, I guess the more military term for that would be humans, rather than OSINT. And human stands for human intelligence rather than what OSINT stands for, which is open source intelligence. And human is more using interviews and observation to gather information rather than using open source information to gather information, right? And now the military, like I said, that can involve espionage and, in the world of journalism, you're obviously probably not going to be using espionage. Uh, but, just like with OSINT, you got to be responsible with whatever information you collect and the interviews conducted in some of the stories we're going to talk about can be very sensitive information that you might be gathering. So you need to be ethical, basically, in whatever you talk about. So this is a big story recently that was done by CNN. So the North Carolina GOP nominee for governor, Mark Robinson. Now we won't talk too in depth about the comments that he made on these forums because obviously they're uh, not something that you would really talk about normally. But Basically, it was discovered that he made several comments on pornography forums, among some of them being "I'm a black Nazi" and other things. Um, Now, part of the way that CNN was able to uncover this is because Mark Robinson's official accounts, and these forum accounts all use the same username. So obviously, it's not always going to be this easy if you're trying to find information about somebody. Like, this was very basic security that you should never use the same information on every single website. I believe generally has common sense, but in this case, Mark Robinson did not follow that advice and got caught out for it. So it's just like using the same password. You don't want to use the same password every single time. Otherwise, your identity is not going to be anonymous or it could be compromised. Um, this is all publicly available information that they found. It was not like they had to hack into anything. Uh, Probably did something as simple as a Google search with that username, and all these search results came up just by doing that. But you might be asking yourself, okay, well, he had the same username. How do they know that it was actually him? Um, we're actually able to corroborate in two other aspects. One, because he tweets so much, they were able to kind of compare his style of writing across all the different websites. And I mean, if you talk to any English teacher, they'll probably tell you the same thing. Everybody has their own unique style of writing. And, you know, I don't believe in coincidences like that. And it's pretty obvious when there's co that many coincidences, it's not a coincidence, right? Um, so the other thing, though, is on one of these forums, I don't remember exactly which one it was, uh, but I believe it was on one of the pornography forums, actually. He had posted uh, aspects about his personal life that kind of lined up timeline wise in his life. So they were able to use publicly available information about his life, whether that was through a biography or something else, and kind of, line the two up and kind of prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was him. And as a result of this, he ended up dropping out of the race and said, "I'm done with politics. I never want to do this again." So, just a recent, pretty big example of this. Uh, but kind of going back to our previous workshop, though, this same sort of intelligence gathering was how Bellingcat was able to identify a lot of these Russian soldiers, how they knew they were in the area when MH17 was shot down. And part of that was because, again, people post more than they should online, and Russian soldiers were no exception. And they posted on the Russian social media platform called VKontakte. Uh, and again, through the use of OSINT, we're able to identify uh, what unit they were a part of, where they were, and at what time. And because there was over 200 of them that posted all this stuff, it was pretty easy to discern this information, right? So, even the military is not immune to this sort of information gathering. And in fact, from what I know in the U.S. military, a lot of times like when you're on exercises or whatever, this is why they require that you have location services turned off, uh, not use any social media when you're on exercises, and this is exactly why. So, want to talk about another example here. This is a really, really good example from one of our previous speakers, actually, Lisa Yurchenko. She talked during the OSINT speakers panel. Really, really great speaker, and I highly encourage you to go watch that panel. Um, but what she did, along with the Kyiv Independent team, was investigate and identify Putin's top spy chief. And, you know, basically the reason this happened was because he's kind of an elusive figure. Nobody knew exactly what he looked like at the time. Nobody was even really sure his exact name. But through the use of public records, such as what you could see in the top right there, his military academy records, his school records, stuff like that, they were able to figure out who he was. So I believe originally the Russians had a picture of him online that was actually, I want to say either an AI image or an image of somebody else. And you could see what he actually looked like, this picture in the bottom right there. Um, but they didn't just use, the public records. They also used leaked information, from local sources, which, you know, one of the things we'll talk about is the ethics of using leaked sources as well. But they match aliases and code names to actual identities, going back and using open source intelligence again. Um, yeah, just basically triangulating multiple different data sources, property records, phone directories, um, and the in fact the other speaker in that panel, Daniil, he uh, is kind of famous in Belarus for doing something similar to this, where they were identifying police officers in Belarus through social media platforms who were committing human rights abuses in Belarus, and Danilo is unfortunately having to leave Belarus because of that. So basically, in the United States, it's a lot easier than it is in countries like Russia or Belarus. And we are going to use fellow speaker here, Scott Christensen, as an example. So, obviously, again, it's not going to be this easy. Scott is a public figure in a way because he's a professor, so he has a lot of work out there. But all I did online was search Scott Christensen, Missouri, and this news article popped up where Scott had ran for office locally here, and through his name, learned a lot about his personal life just from this article. Really, really narrowed it down. So if there was 100,000 Scott Christensens in the Missouri area, it would have made it very easy just based on that. But Scott also has his LinkedIn public, so I know other information such as every place he's ever worked, and I can look up the locations of those places, and I know when he worked at those places. So if he moved around the country, I could potentially know where he lived at those times. Uh, I can know with pretty good certainty how old he is without even having to ask him, just based on his graduation date that he has on his LinkedIn. Generally, most people graduate around the same time, so just using basic logic kind of figured out his age based on that, right? So, total time to locate his address took me 5 minutes, and I was playing a video game while I did this. So, it is not difficult to do this whatsoever. And to be clear, posting information like this online is considered doxing, which does have some legal implications that we'll talk about in a minute. But just based on this free public information, I now know his current address, previous addresses he lived, every phone number he's ever used, including his current one, mother, father, sister, wife, basically every family member, anybody he's ever associated with. And if Scott wasn't this public, the other issue too is, say because if we're going back to this article, actually, it mentions Scott's wife's name. If her information was public, I could figure out more about him just based on that. Because while you might be perfectly secure, not everybody in your family is. There's usually somebody somewhere along the line that posts too much information online. So,
One of the things that's really weird about that, James, if you go back to that one
yeah.
screen that you had there, some of those relatives, um, most of those are relatives that I know. One or two of those I've never met. They're only people that I've seen on that tree from what is that? Not Ancestry, but
23andMe.
yeah, 23andMe. So that's very interesting because they're like, third cousins twice removed or something like that. But they do start to show up now. I just wonder if that's gotten leaked or something, or I have no clue as to why these people are showing up now.
Yeah,
But I mean, it
so
is names I recognize, so it's pretty weird.
yeah, so in these public record sites, um, you know, for whatever reason they are, well, not for whatever reason, that's their whole job is they're extremely good at associating people with you that you might not even
Oh,
realize are
oh,
associated with you.
there's probably another way that they could get to that data.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I
Um,
see.
yeah,
Interesting.
so like I said, this information specifically is all free. Now, if you were to pay for this service, it goes a lot more in depth. I've never personally paid for it before. Um,
So this
but
is all the
these,
free stuff.
yeah, this is all
Oh
free.
shit.
I ain't even have to pay for any of this stuff. So, like anybody could look this up online. Um, so, like there, and if you were to pay for it, I believe generally it's about like 20 or $30. So if somebody really wanted to find information out about you, they're 20 or $30 away from finding your address if it wasn't on here already. So, um, just yeah, example of how easy it is. Um, but talking about how to stay safe online, there want to be clear that there's no perfect way to stay safe online. Obviously, this website that we just talked about is free, and Scott didn't put that information on that website himself. They were able to do that all on their own. And if you look that information up about me, you'd probably find the same results. But there are ways to kind of counteract that information, especially when talking about these journalists from these emerging democracies. It's a little bit different in the United States. I don't know if they have these sort of databases in other countries because privacy laws are a bit different, but it's very open in the United States. Um, but one of the ways to mask that, first of all, like I said before, don't use the same username and password for everything. That's cybersecurity 101. Just simple as that. Don't use anything that can really identify you in your username. Um, that's a big mistake people make too is they think they're anonymous on the online, but then they end up using something like their last name in their username. And what somebody could do is say if that person, I don't know, was trolling online and I wanted to figure out their address, if they use their last name in their username and I was able to figure out their IP address or their internet protocol address, I could narrow down to some certainty approximately where they live and kind of cross-reference last name, that location, okay? And I could basically use other context clues on talking to this person, especially if they talk a lot, to figure out who they actually are. So, yeah, don't use any personally identifiable information if you could avoid it. Uh, and one of the ways to also talking about the IP address thing is using a VPN to mask your location. Now, some are free, but mainly VPNs are paid for. I believe they cost around like $5 a month or so, depending on the VPN service. Um, Scotty, you want to add anything about the VPN? You probably know more about VPNs than I do. Oh, you're muted. Scott, you're muted.
Everybody has to do that once during a Zoom call, I guess. I was gonna say Bruce probably knows a little bit more than I do, but it's a way to kind of encrypt your traffic so that people can't necessarily tell, at least the people that are immediately nearby. It's hard for them to the service providers and such to know where you're going and what you might be doing there and encrypting that data. Um, I think especially when it comes to things like password managers, I generally say that, you probably want to pay for them because otherwise they're monetizing you some other way. So they may be selling the information that, oh, you logged into Facebook at this time or whatever it is, and they're selling that to somebody else. So yeah, I think VPNs, we've gotten into this model where we expect everything to be free, but often it's worth paying for. Also, journalists, they're in other countries that are wanting to make sure that they are, once again, not kind of being watched. We'll use VPNs or even services like Tor, which is a dark, aren't often associated with the dark web, to kind of hide their location, like you were saying about IPs. So that would be another way to almost hide your IP, because then it would look like my email, my browsing came from someplace else where I'm not at, right?
Hmm.
So whereas I can right now, it'll at least say, if I say, well, where's my IP address, it will say, oh, well, that's here in Colombia, and that's this provider, and that data. And like you said, then you can start to narrow it down through other context clues.
Right. Yeah.
Did
So,
Randy, did you have a
I was going
question?
to say something that now that you have Scott's address and his name, you can run that in so many different ways.
yep.
Or you can run it across all kinds of social media platforms and probably get updated pictures of him, his
Yep.
spouse, family,
Yep.
and find out things that have happened recently. You can uh, go to public websites for courts, see if
Yep.
he's ever been charged with anything, right down to a traffic ticket. You can go to the city and see if he's been paying his property taxes on time. Um, and you can and see if he's if he's behind on anything else there. If he's what he's applied for, all that stuff is public record. So if he has a dog, or maybe he has a dog license permit, and so you can learn a tremendous amount about people, and you can probably, even figure out, who he voted for in the last election, and all kinds of other things. I mean, journalists use this all the time to double check candidates and double check sources, um, and and it's pretty frequent to find a candidate somewhere that hasn't paid their taxes, or um, a some business person who they've interviewed is involved in some messy lawsuit somewhere. Um, and so these are typical reporting techniques that if you're in the public eye, you can pretty much expect people to be doing this, um, uh, and discovering lots of stuff and creating a profile of you.
Yeah. And kind of expanding on that too, because we're talking about cybersecurity as well, is uh, if you really think about it, uh, now this is, I believe the term for it is called social engineering. And if we go back here, all these people that are associated with Scott, right? Think about the security questions that secure your accounts. What is your mother's maiden name? What's your dog's name? Where were you born? All that information, I could, if I really wanted to, I could figure out online. I mean, one of those answers is on this page right here, right now for free. So if someone really wanted to break into your account, this is probably how they would do it. Um, but yeah, like Randy was saying, as far as building a profile on somebody, this is how you would kind of go about that. But going back in how to stay safe online, um, one of the things you might want to do is use a disposable email address. They have temporary ones where you could just send one and done. They have temporary phone numbers, like a Google Voice number, I believe, is one of the things that doesn't use your actual normal number. It uses one that Google assigns to you. Um, and then this one is very popular widely used by journalists and activists across the world. It's called Signal. It's an encrypted texting app, and a lot of journalists use it for communication because generally these countries with um, low uh, journalistic freedoms, they cannot break into the Signal app and figure out what's being said about the government. So it's a very, very popular tool around the globe for that reason. Um, but one of the things Scott was talking about before is using a password manager, but you really want to regularly update your passwords. I don't mention it. I probably should have added it. Is there's a website called Have I Been Pwned actually, and it can look up all your accounts to see if the passwords have been leaked. So that's usually a good indication you probably want to update your password. But yeah, at the end of the day, writing them down on a piece of paper if the location is secure, uh, nobody's going to be able to hack into your living room. At the end of the day, they can break in, but they're not going to be able to hack into it. So, um, that is another method, keeping passwords safe. Like I said before, don't use the same information for everything. Biggest mistake Mark Robinson made is using the same username. Definitely don't want to use the same password. And using, you know, publicly identifiable information like he did, where he talked about his personal life to where people can use those context clues to identify you. Uh, Another way to lose your anonymity online, if I could speak. But yeah, family members can unfortunately expose your information too. You could be the safest person in the world, but if you got a bunch of family members that post on social media, yeah, I mean, you could be in the background of a picture. You could uh, be married to the person, and they could figure out the information that way because you're at the same address. Uh, but really, the lesson here is not pure paranoia. Obviously, journalists in some of these countries with these low press freedoms have to worry a lot, but you don't generally have to be the safest. You just have to be safer than most when it comes to cybersecurity. I believe the example Scott used when I was talking with him is if there's a neighborhood full of houses and everybody's house is unlocked except yours, they're probably going to go to the houses that are unlocked before they go to yours with the security system because it's just easier. Now, somebody really wants to find out this information about you at the end of the day, unfortunately, at least in the United States, there's no perfect way to secure your information, but you at least make it a lot more difficult. You don't have to make it this easy for them. Uh, and
Um,
again, it's a little bit more difficult when you're a public figure, though.
I think Bruce had unmuted there. Maybe he had a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's a couple of things I might suggest if people want to see what's available and how it's used against you. One of my favorite social engineers is a lady named Rachel Toback. She's been on 60 Minutes. Just, fire up the Google machine and watch her in action. It is very impressive. The other thing is, well, I'm in Texas now. I generally live in California. California has some exceptional privacy rules. And one of the things it allows you to do is actually, in essence, request from people that you do business with, companies that collect your information, what have they collected and how do they use it? And I would say that would be eye-opening. So the stuff that he was showing you about yourself, Scott, um, I would say is just the surface. I got a privacy report from Home Depot, who I probably go to no more than probably 6 times a year. I expected to get a page or two from them. I actually got a report on me that was, I want to say, maybe 14 pages long. So they have the data that they collect about you, and then they have, all these people like um, uh, the data warehouse companies, they'll actually sell data as well. So they'll have inferences about you. They'll have, your religious affiliation, your political affiliation, addresses, what they suspect that you make. And those things are clearly usable. Both um, those are usable um, to be able to attack you, right? I mean, the people that sell that information, the companies that sell that information, it's it's available to anybody that wants it, basically. So you think you have privacy, you think you're anonymous, you're kidding yourselves.
Yeah.
So that's what I always tell my students is I show them a sample report on myself and I say, I'm actually paranoid about my privacy. Here's what's, known about me. So you have to assume that all that information is available to whoever wants it. And how would you behave differently if you knew that? So things like keeping your credit wide open doesn't make any sense at all, so that it can be exploited by somebody else. It should always be locked and only open when you intend to use it.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. Um, but yeah, like there's no perfect way to protect yourself, but like I said, like just you want to make it more difficult at the very least. You don't want to make it easy for them.
Right. We always say you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than your friend.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so kind of talking about the ethical and legal considerations here when in regards to journalism, right? Um, so obviously, thinking back to the Mark Robinson story, that whole situation ruined his entire campaign, right? So if CNN was wrong about that, not only can that potentially open them up to being sued, they could ruin a person's life if they're wrong. So, um, you always got to double check these things. And at the end of the day, you want to be respectful of people's privacy rights. And pointing out what I was talking about with Scott. This is why, obviously, I blurt out the information because I want to be respectful of his privacy. But posting that information online is considered doxing, and uh, you know, you don't want to reveal personal info when when talking about journalism that isn't in the public interest. There's just no point in posting stuff like that online. Um, like in the Mark Robinson case, obviously they wouldn't post his address. It's not relevant to the story, as an example. Um, so in cases like when talking about with Elisa's story where they were identifying Putin's spy chief, they were using local sources to identify a lot of this information. And in a country like Russia, that could be dangerous to some of these individuals. So, being mindful of your sources, like obviously you want to talk about a little bit how you were able to come to this conclusion, how you were a little bit about how you were able to identify these certain aspects, but being mindful of not revealing too much to where it could put somebody in jeopardy or, it could be harmful to somebody who you're talking about, right? Um, then there's just simply the accuracy and verification aspect of it. Uh, at the end of the day, you want to use multiple independent sources to confirm these identities, especially when using the leaked information. Daniil and Elisa both used publicly sourced leaked information. Um, and sometimes that information is not always accurate, so that's why you got to be a good journalist and you got to actually make sure it's accurate. And if in doubt, you know should just ask the subject about it. Obviously, in the case of Putin's spy chief, they're probably not going to comment on it. uh but in the case of like Mark Robinson, he's considered a public figure, and ideally a person who's going into politics should probably be open for comments to the public. But yeah. um I want to talk about the legal framework of this stuff, though, and I'm not too familiar with other countries' privacy laws. I know Europe is pretty strict in general. The EU has pretty strict privacy laws. Um, California and Illinois both have pretty good privacy laws. And Bruce probably knows a lot more about that than I would, but for as far as California goes, but um, you know. Like in the Mark Robinson case again, if they were wrong, it could be considered defamation. So, that's another law that could potentially, or well, I guess that would be civil law to be specific. But there's no federal doxing laws. That being said, many states, if not all of them, have a law against digital harassment, and I believe every state in the United States has one against stalking, which sometimes doxing can fall under. So, this is why you got to be careful about what information you release online, what information you talk about, because you don't want to open yourself up to lawsuits. Um, and you know, it really is on a case by case basis sometimes. Unfortunately, as I'm sure many people are aware, the law is still not caught up to technology by any means. So it can depend on the state. Obviously, it could depend on the country, but um, each case can. It really just depends, is the point. But if you're not sure when talking about a story, always consult legal counsel. You don't want to open yourself up to any issues with that. Randy, I saw you unmuted. Do you want to add something?
No, I mean, I think you're right. You know, to always run these kinds of stories past legal counsel, they may have some resources that you've not thought of or didn't have access to do some checking, but they can also ask good questions that can make you go back and triple and quadruple check to make sure what you have is right. Another thing I was going to mention that, if you are a credit card holder and they do routine surveys and I don't know about everybody else here on the call, but I have a Chase card, and they'll let me know if something appeared on the dark web, like uh, somebody had used a so-called sign-in number and associated with me, um, and that can, if you're using the same sign-in number, that'll be a wake-up call for you to change that. Or the same username, that'll be a wake-up call for you. So these things these credit cards, and everybody seems to have one these days, can be useful in helping you monitor and keep your account safe. So read those emails that they send to you, and go look at that stuff, because they're constantly looking for fraud. Because one thing about credit card debt is, it doesn't have there's uh, if it's if it's improperly charged, they're very concerned about that, because it can make it very hard for them to actually collect their money. So they want to make sure that they're on top of that.
Hmm. Yeah, great point. Um, yeah, so gonna go to the next slide here. Just talk about some more helpful tools. And again, I believe this all these slides will be sent out. Um, Talked about some of these in the first OSINT session, but Bellingcat has a lot of great guides on all this stuff. Anything OSINT related you could possibly think of, they've probably covered it. Uh, the exit viewer or using imageforensic.com, somebody posts a picture online, a lot of data you could gather from those pictures, more than people realize. Maltego, I don't believe they used it in the CNN investigation, uh, because again, it was something pretty simple, just associating usernames. But Maltego, it's a paid service. You can actually find connections between email addresses, IP addresses. It goes a lot more in depth. It's a very popular OSINT tool for that reason. And speaking of pictures, using TinEye to free reverse image searcher. You could also use Google Images as an image searcher as well. Um, but you know. again, talking about if you use the same picture for everything, you don't even have to use the same username. If somebody used the same profile picture for every profile, you could find them that way too. Uh, there's the website called That's Them. It's one of those kind of public record searches where you can see that not the exact one that I used to find Scott's address, but just an example of one. And it was mentioned earlier talking about court cases. JudyRecords.com has that. Missouri has its own court record search, and I believe a couple other states do as well. I believe Indiana has one off the top of my head, but not every state has a specific one to them. So this 2drecords.com is a general United States one. So it's another good resource. And yeah, these are some of the people that I talked about here. Anyone have any questions that I could potentially answer? If I could read the chat here.
I was once again muted. I was just doing a quick lookup of Randy on one of those sites, and it tells me when he was born, and it tells me what his current address is and phone number, and then I can get the premium one and probably get his Social Security or something.
Yeah.
You probably can
Okay.
get his criminal record.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can
yes.
look that up too. We have a state website here. You can do that called casenet.com. So you can just in Missouri, you can look up Scott or me and see what you find there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And any other questions or comments? Well, I wanted to say not only thank you to James for doing this. This has been enlightening. I obviously probably can't pull back the things that are out there, but I will be thinking a little bit more about what I do put out there. I also want to thank the participants because this is great to have this kind of discussion. This is really meant to not just be yet another Zoom lecture, but to be an interactive discussion. And so I appreciate everybody's contributions along the way here as well.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and as I mentioned, the next one will be, I think, April 2nd, so just in 4 weeks from now, and it'll be on data visualization. And we'll have a person that does this as their full-time job is helping nonprofits with their data visualization needs. I think that'll be pretty interesting.
Scott, is there a way? I mean, I don't have stuff available to me right now, but just to um, sort of add to the comments that I made earlier, it would be interesting. I'd like to be able to share, something with the people that were part of this talk.
Yeah,
I can show them an article that shows a reporter talking about their own privacy report. I don't know that I want to share mine, but
right.
sharing their own. And then I use a product that's from a bend. Um, and actually, I could show you the progress over time on how many different sources there were for information on me. There was dozens and dozens. And by
Huh.
having a membership in that, it shows over time how that's been decreased pretty
Huh.
dramatically. I know that when I look myself up now or my family, it actually shows everybody else in my family, but it doesn't show me.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So it is
Well,
somewhat effective. So I don't know what the mechanism is, but I'd
yeah, I'll
love to
reach
see.
out to you tomorrow, Bruce,
Yeah,
and we'll or this weekend, and
yeah,
we'll talk
figure
about
out a
other
way.
stuff as well as that.
Great
So,
papers. I'd like to see what the first talk was, get the slides from that, and then I'll trade you some information. I'll give you something for a sample privacy report, and then something you can do about it if you don't like the answer.
oh, that sounds great.
Okay?
Appreciate it. All right.
Okay,
Well,
thank you,
thank
everybody.
you
I
all,
really had good.
and
It was great.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you all very much, and we will. Thanks, James, again, and we will see you all on the next one.
Okay,
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
thank you. Bye now.